Now we're ready to continue our exploration of imperfect competition markets for the case of an oligopoly. There are many markets in the world that have more than one firm, so they are not monopolies, but only a handful of them, so they are not perfect competition. That intermediate case is this case of monopoly that is of great practical interest. And it's of great practical interest because the firms will have some market power, but not as much market power as they have a monopoly. And that's what we want to understand with this basic model of the monopoly that we are about to understand. So let's assume that there are two firms to look at the simplest case of the monopoly model, then we will complicate it. And let Q1 and Q2 denote the amount produced by each firm. And let Ci of Qi be the cost functions, and assume that there are no fixed costs or semi-fixed costs, to keep it simple. Now, the key assumption of the model is that firms profit maximize, as always, taking into account or given the actions of the other firm, which, by the way, they anticipate correctly. And let me make a comment about this. This notion that they anticipate correctly is sometimes called rational expectations, or is an instance of rational expectations, which means that in equilibrium people know, the actors know correctly what others are going to do. One important aspect of the monopoly model that is good, get an intuition, clear intuition from the beginning, is that the choice that every firm faces involves some important strategic considerations. And by strategic considerations, I mean that the best action for a firm is going to depend on what the other firm does. And the key reason why that is the case is because the demand faced by one of the firms, let's say by firm I, depends on the choice of the other firm, let's say firm J. And let's see why. In particular, suppose to see why that the demand, inverse demand function for the market as a function of Q, the total quantity, is linear and has this shape, P of the market minus M Q. Suppose that this is the aggregate demand function for the market, then look at what happens. We're going to plot first that demand function, which looks like this, PD of the market of Q1 plus Q2. This is a choice by the two firms. And now suppose that firm 2, let's say, chooses this quantity. Question is, what is the demand that firm 1 is going to face, given that it's going to be given by this? This is going to be the demand of, as a function of Q1 that firm 1 faces, given that the other firm produced Q2. And let's see why that is the case. Well, we know that total demand is given by this linear thing minus M times the sum. If the other firm already chose that, it's only this part of the demand function that firm 1 can fill. Basically, if it produces nothing, this will be the price. If it keeps producing, the price will drop lower and lower. That's why, from the point of view of firm 1, the demand function, how it affects the price as a function of what it produces, is shifted to the left just by this amount. Okay, given that, now let's look at what the problem of each of the firms look like. So let's look at a firm I, which can be either of the two, which is going to want to maximize over Qi greater or equal than 0, its revenue, Qi, times the demand given by the amount that it chooses and the other one chooses, because both affect the price, minus Ci of Qi, and very important, this Qj is taken as given. The action of the other firm is taken as given by the equilibrium choice of the other firm. Let me emphasize what I mean by that. When firm I is solving its problem, it assumes that it knows exactly what firm J is going to do, and it takes it as a constant in the maximization problem. So what are the first order conditions for this problem? Which by the way are also going to be sufficient. It's going to be taking the derivatives Qi times the derivative of PD with respect to Qi plus PD equals to the marginal cost for firm I. And notice, recall that this shape you have seen before of this equation, this is the marginal revenue with respect to Qi given Qj. Now, depending on the details of the function, it's going to have a unique solution, and let's call the solution, let Qi star of Qj denote the solution. So this is going to tell you what the best response for firm I is to any choice by Qj. And let me plot for you what this looks like. So if I have the aggregate demand for the market, let's suppose as before that firm to choose here, let's say Q2, so that the demand function for firm 1 becomes this. Notice that from this intuitively, then what remains is a problem that looks like the monopoly problem, just given with the shifted demand. So what we do is we plot the marginal revenue curve as a function. Sorry, this is Qi and Qj. I made a typo here. Of Qi as a function of Qj. And if the cost function of Qj is here, of Qi, what the firm is going to do is going to pick this, the point at which marginal revenue equals marginal cost. So this is going to be Qi star, and this will be the price in the market that results. Okay. So the key idea that you need to remember is that it looks like the monopoly problem, but the demand has shifted because of the choice by the other firm. Okay, now we're ready to define what an equilibrium in this market is going to be, and I'm going to define it for the case of two firms, and we'll see how generalized in a second. So an oligopoly equilibrium is going to be given by a quantity for the first firm and a quantity for the second firm that has the following properties, such that Q1 star, or sorry, Q1 OL is a best response, so we're going to write like this, Q star of what the other firm does, and Q2 OL is equal to Q2 star of Q1 OL. So the key idea is that both firms are best responding to each other. And let me make some remarks about this. First, again, the notion of rational expectations is key. Notice that each firm is best responding to each other's equilibrium action, and the equilibrium action of the other firms is anticipated correctly. Second, again, let me emphasize that firms are best responding to each other. Third, at equilibrium, there is no incentive to deviate. What I mean by that is that the two quantities that are being predicted by the equilibrium are an equilibrium because given what the other person is doing, no one wants to deviate because they are best responding to each other. And fourth is that this equilibrium concept generalizes to more than two firms. And the key idea of how it generalizes is that you best respond to the actions of all other firms. So for example, if there were 3 firms, the equilibrium level for firm 1 will be the best response to the choices of firms 2 and 3, etc.